The auctioneer's hammer came down with a crack that split Sarah Zimmerman's heart clean in two, and she knew in that moment that her brother had finally destroyed what was left of their family. She stood on the wooden platform in the center of Durango, Colorado, her hands trembling at her sides as the autumn wind of 1882 whipped through her dark hair. The crowd before her was a mix of ranchers, gamblers, and men with hungry eyes that made her skin crawl. Her brother Thomas had accumulated debts totaling $3,000, a fortune she could never hope to repay through honest work. The loan sharks had given him a choice: sell his sister or lose his life. Thomas had chosen himself, as he always did. $3,000, the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying across the town square. Who will pay $3,000 for this fine young woman? She is 22 years old, healthy, and capable of all manner of household duties. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to block out the humiliation. Her mother had died 2 years ago from consumption, and her father had been killed in a mining accident when she was 16. Thomas was all she had left, and he had sold her like livestock to save his own worthless hide. 2,000, called a voice from the back. Sarah recognized him as Marcus Webb, a cruel saloon owner known for working his girls until they dropped. 2,500, another man shouted. This one was older, with gray in his beard and a leer that made Sarah want to disappear. The bidding continued, each number another nail in the coffin of her dignity. She wondered if death might have been preferable to whatever fate awaited her. At least then she would be with her parents again, free from the shame of being bought and sold like cattle. Then a voice cut through the crowd, deep and clear as a church bell. $6,000. The entire square fell silent. Sarah opened her eyes and searched for the speaker. The crowd parted, and she saw him for the first time. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his dusty work shirt. His dark hair curled slightly beneath his hat, and his face was tanned from years under the Colorado sun. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, green as spring grass and fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. 6,000, the auctioneer stammered. Sir, the debt is only 3,000. I know what I said, the cowboy replied, stepping forward. His boots echoed on the packed dirt as he approached the platform. $6,000, cash. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. Count it if you want. The auctioneer's hands shook as he took the money. The crowd murmured and shifted, curiosity rippling through them like water. Sarah stared at this stranger who had just paid double her brother's debt. Why would anyone do that? Well then, the auctioneer said, his voice high with excitement. Sold to Mr. Ryder Dalton for $6,000. Ryder Dalton climbed the steps to the platform. Up close, Sarah could see the lines around his eyes, the slight scar on his chin, the way his jaw was set with determination. He was perhaps 27 or 28, she guessed, with the weathered look of a man who had spent his life working hard. Come on, he said quietly, offering her his hand. Let us get you out of here. Sarah took his hand because she had no other choice. His palm was rough with calluses, but his grip was gentle. He led her down the steps and through the parting crowd. She could feel every eye on them, hear the whispers following in their wake. Thomas was waiting at the edge of the square, his face pale and drawn. He reached out as they passed. Sarah, I am sorry. I did not have a choice. They would have killed me. Ryder stopped walking. He turned to face Thomas with a coldness that made Sarah shiver. Your brother can rot, he said, his voice hard as iron. If I ever see you near her again, I will make you wish those loan sharks had gotten to you first. Thomas opened his mouth to protest, but something in Ryder's expression made him step back. Sarah felt a fierce satisfaction at seeing her brother's cowardice, even as her own fear threatened to overwhelm her. She had been saved from one fate, but what awaited her with this stranger? Ryder led her to a wagon at the end of the street. It was well maintained, with a sturdy mare hitched to the front. He helped her up onto the seat with surprising courtesy, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. "Where are you taking me?" Sarah asked, finding her voice at last. "My ranch," Ryder said, clicking his tongue to get the mare moving. "It is about 10 miles north of town. You will be safe there." Safe. The word seemed almost foreign after everything that had happened. "Why did you pay double?" Ryder was silent for a long moment, his eyes on the road ahead. "Because I wanted to make sure no one else could claim any part of you. That extra 3,000 means your brother's debt is more than paid. No one can come after you for it." Sarah absorbed this information slowly. "But you do not know me. Why would you spend so much money on a stranger?" "I have my reasons," Ryder said. He glanced at her, and something in his expression softened. "I am not going to hurt you, Miss Zimmerman. I know you have no cause to trust me, but I swear on my mother's grave that you are safe with me." They rode in silence for a while. The landscape around Durango was beautiful in the fall, with golden aspens dotting the hillsides and the San Juan Mountains rising in the distance. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Sarah had always loved this country, even in her darkest moments. "What do you expect from me?" she finally asked, needing to know the truth. Ryder shifted on the seat. "I expect you to rest, to eat, to recover from what you have been through. Beyond that, we can figure things out as we go. But you paid $6,000. You must want something." "I want you to have a choice," Ryder said firmly. "Something your brother took from you. When you are ready, we will talk about the future. Until then, you are free to do as you please within the bounds of the ranch." Sarah did not know what to make of this man. Everything she had heard about men who bought women from auctions suggested they were cruel, selfish, interested only in their own pleasure. But Ryder spoke with a gentleness that confused her. Was it a trick? Or could he possibly mean what he said? The ranch appeared over a rise, and Sarah caught her breath. It was more beautiful than she had expected. A sprawling property with a sturdy 2-story house, a large barn, and several corrals where horses grazed in the afternoon sun. The mountains provided a dramatic backdrop, their peaks already dusted with early snow. "You live here alone?" Sarah asked. "I have 3 ranch hands who work for me," Ryder said. "Miguel, James, and Billy. They are good men. They will not bother you." He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "The house is plenty big. You will have your own room upstairs." He helped her down from the wagon, and Sarah stood uncertainly on the packed earth of the yard. A dog came running from the barn, a border collie with bright eyes and a wagging tail. It circled them both, clearly excited by the new arrival. "That is Scout," Ryder said with a hint of a smile. "He thinks he runs the place." Sarah reached down to pet the dog, grateful for something normal to focus on. Scout licked her hand enthusiastically, and despite everything, she felt the ghost of a smile touch her lips. "Come inside," Ryder said. "I will show you around." The house was well kept, with solid furniture and clean floors. Ryder led her through a comfortable sitting room with a stone fireplace, a dining room with a large wooden table, and a kitchen that was surprisingly tidy for a bachelor household. "I do most of my own cooking," Ryder said, noticing her surprise. "My mother taught me before she passed. She said a man should know how to take care of himself." Upstairs, there were 4 bedrooms. Ryder showed her to the largest of the guest rooms, which had a bed with a colorful quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the mountains. "This is yours," he said. "There is a lock on the inside of the door. Use it if it makes you feel safer." Sarah walked into the room slowly, running her hand over the quilt. It was well made with a pattern of stars and diamonds. "Who made this?" "My mother," Ryder said quietly. "She was a great quilter. I have kept her things." He paused in the doorway. "I will give you some time to settle in. There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash up. Supper will be ready around 6. He left, closing the door behind him. Sarah stood alone in the room, her mind reeling. She went to the door and tested the lock. It worked smoothly. Then she went to the window and looked out at the ranch. She could see horses in the distance, a group of cattle on a far hill, and the mountains watching over everything like silent guardians. She sank down on the edge of the bed and let herself cry for the first time since this nightmare had begun. She cried for her lost freedom, for the brother who had betrayed her, for the parents who were no longer there to protect her. She cried until she had no tears left, and then she washed her face with the cool water from the pitcher and tried to compose herself. Whatever happened next, she would face it with as much dignity as she could muster. She had survived this long. She would find a way to survive whatever came after. When Sarah came downstairs at 6 o'clock, she found Ryder in the kitchen, stirring something in a large pot on the stove. The smell of beef stew filled the air, making her stomach growl. She realized she had not eaten since early morning. "I hope you like stew," Ryder said, glancing up at her. "It is pretty much my specialty." "It smells wonderful," Sarah admitted. Ryder dished up 2 bowls and carried them to the dining room. Sarah followed, feeling awkward and uncertain. They sat across from each other at the large table, and for a few minutes they ate in silence. The stew was delicious, rich with vegetables and tender meat. Sarah found herself eating faster than was ladylike, her hunger overcoming her manners. "Have as much as you want," Ryder said. "There is plenty." "Thank you," Sarah said softly. She finished her first bowl and accepted a second. As the food settled in her stomach, she felt some of her strength returning. "May I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really buy me? And please do not tell me it was just to help a stranger. No one spends $6,000 for that." Ryder set down his spoon and met her eyes. "5 years ago," he said slowly, "my younger sister was in a situation similar to yours. My father had died and she was left with his debts. I was working on a ranch in New Mexico at the time, trying to save money to buy my own place. I did not know what was happening until it was too late." Sarah felt her chest tighten. "What happened to her?" "She was sold to a man in Santa Fe. I found out a week later and rode like hell to get there. But by the time I arrived, she had already tried to escape. He caught her and beat her so badly that she died from her injuries." Ryder's voice was steady, but Sarah could see the pain in his eyes. "Her name was Emily. She was 19 years old." "I am so sorry," Sarah whispered. "I swore after I buried her that if I ever had the chance to save someone else from that fate, I would do it, no matter the cost." Ryder picked up his spoon again, though he did not eat. "When I heard about the auction today, I knew I had to be there. I have been saving for years to expand the ranch. That $6,000 was most of what I had. But I would spend it again in a heartbeat if it meant giving you the choice Emily never got." Sarah felt tears welling up again. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything. Just know that you are safe here, for as long as you want to stay." They finished their meal in a more comfortable silence. Afterward, Ryder showed her how to work the pump at the kitchen sink and where he kept the firewood for the stove. He treated her like a guest, not a possession, and with each passing hour, Sarah felt a tiny bit of the weight on her chest lifting. That night, she lay in the comfortable bed and stared at the ceiling. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of settling wood and the distant howl of a coyote. She had locked the door, but somehow she did not feel as afraid as she had expected to. Ryder Dalton was either the most honorable man she had ever met or a very skilled liar. Time would tell which. The next morning, Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through her window. For a moment, she forgot where she was, and then the memories came flooding back. She dressed in the same clothes she had worn the day before, her only clothes, and went downstairs. Ryder was already up, making coffee in the kitchen. He looked up when she entered and nodded a greeting. "Morning. There are eggs and bread if you are hungry." "Thank you," Sarah said. She poured herself a cup of coffee and added a bit of sugar from the bowl on the counter. The coffee was strong and hot, exactly what she needed. "What do you usually do all day?" "Ranch work," Ryder said. "Feeding the animals, mending fences, training horses. There is always something that needs doing." He hesitated. "You are welcome to explore the place if you want, or just rest." "Whatever you need." Sarah thought about this as she ate her breakfast. She could spend the day hiding in her room, or she could start trying to understand this strange new life. "Could I see the horses?" Ryder's face brightened slightly. "You like horses?" "I used to," Sarah said. "My father worked in the mines, but before that he worked at a stable. He taught me to ride when I was young." "Then come on," Ryder said, standing up. "I will introduce you to the herd." They walked out to the barn together, Scout trotting along beside them. The morning air was cool and fresh, with a hint of wood smoke from a distant chimney. Sarah breathed deeply, feeling more alive than she had in weeks. The barn was large and well organized, with stalls lining both sides and a hayloft overhead. Horses nickered and shifted as they entered, curious about the visitors. Ryder led her down the aisle, pointing out each animal. "This is Thunder," he said, stopping at a stall with a massive gray gelding. "He is my main workhorse, strong as an ox and twice as stubborn." He moved to the next stall. "This is Daisy, my best mare. She just had a foal 2 months ago." Sarah looked into the stall and saw a beautiful bay mare with a leggy foal beside her. The baby had a white star on its forehead and looked at her with large, liquid eyes. "Oh," Sarah breathed. "He is beautiful." "She," Ryder corrected with a smile. "I call her Morning Star because she was born right at dawn." Without thinking, Sarah reached over the stall door. The mare sniffed her hand cautiously, then allowed herself to be petted. The foal stumbled over on gangly legs, curious about this new person. Sarah laughed as the baby nuzzled her palm, looking for treats. "She likes you," Ryder observed. "I like her too," Sarah said. She looked at Ryder, this man who had saved her, and asked nothing in return. "Thank you for showing me this." "Any time," Ryder said, and she could tell he meant it. Over the next few weeks, a pattern developed. Ryder would go out to work the ranch, and Sarah would explore her new surroundings. She met the ranch hands. Miguel, a quiet man in his 40s with a kind smile; James, a young cowboy barely 20 with freckles and an easy laugh; and Billy, a weathered man of 60 who had been working ranches since before Sarah was born. All three treated her with courtesy and respect, clearly taking their cues from Ryder. Sarah found herself drawn to the barn more and more. She would spend hours with the horses, especially Morning Star and Daisy. Ryder noticed and began teaching her more about horse care. He showed her how to brush them properly, how to check their hooves, how to mix the feed. He was a patient teacher, never condescending, always encouraging. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Sarah was in the barn brushing Daisy when Ryder approached with a saddle. "Feel like going for a ride?" he asked. Sarah's heart leaped. "Really, if you want to. I thought we could ride up to the north pasture. The aspens are at their peak right now, and the view is something special." Sarah nodded eagerly. Ryder saddled Daisy for her and Thunder for himself. He helped her mount, his hands careful and respectful. The moment she was in the saddle, Sarah felt a rush of freedom she had not experienced in months. She had forgotten how much she loved this feeling. They rode out of the ranch yard at an easy walk, Scout running ahead to sniff at interesting spots. The countryside was glorious, painted in shades of gold and red. The aspens shimmered in the breeze, their leaves catching the light like coins. The air was crisp and carried the scent of autumn, with smoke and dry grass and distant pine. "Tell me about your family," Ryder said as they rode. Before everything went wrong. Sarah took a breath, surprised by the question but grateful for it. "My father was a good man, hard-working, honest. He loved my mother more than anything in the world. They used to dance in the kitchen on Saturday nights, just the two of them." She smiled at the memory. "My mother was gentle, always singing while she worked. She made the best apple pie in 3 counties. Everyone said so." "What about Thomas?" Ryder asked carefully. Sarah's expression darkened. "Thomas was different. Even when we were children, he always wanted more than he had. He would lie to get out of chores, steal coins from my father's pocket. My parents made excuses for him, said he would grow out of it." She shook her head. "But he only got worse. After my father died, Thomas started gambling. My mother tried to stop him, but he would not listen. I think the stress of it helped kill her. And then, when she was gone, there was no one to even try to rein him in." "That must have been hard," Ryder said. "Watching him destroy himself. The worst part was that he did not just destroy himself, he destroyed me too." Sarah's voice was bitter. "I tried to help him. I took in sewing, worked as a laundress, anything to help pay the bills, but it was never enough. He would just gamble away whatever I earned." They rode in silence for a while. Then Ryder said, "You know it is not your fault, right? What he did, that is on him. Not you." Sarah felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten it was there. "Sometimes I wonder if I could have done more." "You did everything you could," Ryder said firmly. "More than he deserved. A man who would sell his own sister to save himself is not worth your guilt or your grief." They reached the north pasture, and Ryder was right about the view. The entire valley spread out before them, a patchwork of gold and green with the mountains rising behind. A small stream cut through the meadow, its water sparkling in the afternoon sun. It was one of the most beautiful things Sarah had ever seen. "Oh," she breathed, "it is perfect." "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," Ryder said. "I come up here when I need to think." He dismounted and helped Sarah down. They let the horses graze while they sat on a fallen log overlooking the valley. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said after a while. "Sure." "Do you ever regret it, spending all that money on me?" Ryder turned to look at her, his green eyes serious. "Not for 1 second, not even a little bit. But you could have used that money to expand your ranch, to hire more hands or buy more stock." "Money comes and goes," Ryder said. "But I could not have lived with myself if I had walked away from that auction. Every time I closed my eyes, I would have seen Emily's face, and yours." He looked back at the valley. "Besides, you have been worth every penny. You have brought life back to that house. It has not felt like a home in a long time." Sarah felt her face flush. "I have not done anything special. You have been yourself. That is special enough." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the aspen leaves dance in the wind. Sarah felt something shifting inside her, the walls she had built around her heart beginning to crack. She had been so focused on surviving, on protecting herself from more pain, that she had forgotten what it felt like to simply be happy. But here, in this beautiful place with this kind man, happiness seemed possible again. The ride back to the ranch was slower, both of them reluctant to leave the golden afternoon behind. When they reached the barn, Ryder taught Sarah how to unsaddle Daisy and rub her down properly. Their hands brushed as they worked, and Sarah felt a spark of something she did not want to examine too closely. That evening, Ryder surprised her by pulling out a worn checkerboard. "Do you play?" "My father taught me," Sarah said. They set up the board on the dining room table and played while the fire crackled in the hearth. Sarah won the first game, Ryder the second. They were in the middle of a tiebreaker when Ryder said, "I need to go into town tomorrow for supplies. Would you like to come?" Sarah hesitated. The thought of facing the people of Durango again made her stomach turn, but she could not hide forever. "Yes," she said, "I would." The next morning they rode into town together. Sarah held her head high as they drove down the main street, refusing to show the fear she felt inside. She could see people staring, whispering behind their hands. Let them stare. She had done nothing wrong. Ryder kept close to her side as they visited the general store. He bought flour, sugar, coffee, and other necessities. Then, to Sarah's surprise, he led her to the dress shop. "You need some new clothes," he said simply. "Pick out whatever you want." "Ryder, I cannot ask you to spend more money on me." "You are not asking, I am offering. Please, Sarah, let me do this." The shop owner, Mrs. Henderson, was a plump woman in her 50s with a measuring tape draped around her neck. She looked at Sarah with curiosity but no judgment. "What can I do for you, dear?" "She needs at least 3 good dresses," Ryder said. "Work dresses, something practical, and whatever else women need." Mrs. Henderson smiled. "I have just the thing. Come with me, dear." For the next hour Sarah tried on dresses while Mrs. Henderson pinned and adjusted. They settled on 3 dresses in sturdy cotton, 1 dark blue, 1 green, and 1 brown with tiny flowers. Mrs. Henderson also convinced her to take 2 petticoats, a warm shawl, and a new pair of boots. "The boots you are wearing are practically falling apart," the shopkeeper said kindly. "These will last you years if you take care of them." When everything was tallied up, the cost was substantial. But Ryder paid without hesitation, carrying the packages out to the wagon. Sarah felt overwhelmed by his generosity. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." "I do not want repayment," Ryder said. "I want you to be comfortable, that is all." On the way back to the ranch, they passed the saloon where Thomas usually spent his time. Sarah caught a glimpse of her brother through the window, hunched over a card table. He looked thinner than before, his face haggard. For a moment she felt a pang of the old worry. Then she remembered him standing on that platform, remembered the way he had looked at her with relief as the auctioneer took bids. The worry hardened into something else, something colder. "Are you all right?" Ryder asked, noticing her expression. "Yes," Sarah said. "I am fine." That night, Sarah tried on her new dresses in her room. The blue one fit perfectly, bringing out the color of her eyes. She looked at herself in the small mirror over the dresser and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked healthier than she had in months, with color in her cheeks and a brightness to her eyes that had been missing. Living at the ranch, eating regular meals and spending time outdoors had transformed her. She thought about Ryder, about his kindness and patience. He had asked nothing of her except to be herself. He had given her space to heal, time to figure out what she wanted. And somewhere along the way, she had started to care for him, more than care for him if she was honest with herself. The realization terrified her. What if she was wrong about him? What if his kindness was just a long game, a way to make her trust him before he revealed his true intentions? But even as she thought it, she knew it was not true. Ryder was exactly who he appeared to be, a good man who had suffered loss and wanted to prevent others from suffering the same way. The question was, what did she do about these feelings? Autumn deepened into early winter. The first snow fell in mid-November, transforming the ranch into a wonderland of white. Sarah stood at her window one morning and watched the flakes drift down, covering everything in a soft blanket. She had been at the ranch for nearly 2 months now, and it had started to feel like home. She went downstairs to find Ryder already up, stoking the fire in the sitting room. "Morning," he said with a smile. "Did you see the snow? "It is beautiful," Sarah said. She poured herself coffee and stood by the fire, warming her hands. "What do you do on the ranch when it snows?" "Same as always, mostly. The animals still need feeding and watering, but we can take a break from some of the heavier work." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Actually, I was thinking of cutting down a Christmas tree today. Would you want to help?" A Christmas tree. Sarah had not thought about Christmas in years. Her family had never had much money for celebrations. "My mother used to insist on it every year," Ryder said. "I have kept up the tradition. We go up to the high country, find a nice pine and bring it back to decorate. It is one of my favorite parts of the year." "I would love to help," Sarah said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. After breakfast, they bundled up in warm coats and headed out. Ryder hitched Thunder to a sled he had in the barn, and they set off into the snowy landscape. Scout bounded alongside them, his black and white coat standing out against the white ground. The ride was magical. The world was hushed under its blanket of snow, and the only sounds were the jingle of the harness and the soft crunch of the sled runners. They rode up into the pine forest, where the trees stood tall and dark against the white sky. "What about that one?" Sarah asked, pointing to a particularly full pine. Ryder studied it with a critical eye. "It is a good tree, but I think we can do better. My mother always said the perfect tree would call to you. You just had to listen." They continued through the forest, examining trees. Some were too tall, others too sparse. Then Sarah saw it, standing slightly apart from the others. It was about 7 feet tall, with full branches and a perfect shape. "There," she said. "That is the one." Ryder looked at the tree and grinned. "You are right, that is it." He took an axe from the sled and began chopping. Sarah watched him work, noting the flex of his muscles under his coat, the way his breath formed clouds in the cold air. When the tree finally fell, they dragged it together to the sled and secured it with rope. On the way back, Sarah felt lighter than she had in years. There was something about the simple joy of finding the perfect tree, of being out in the clean snow with someone she trusted, that made all her worries seem distant and small. Back at the ranch, they set the tree up in the sitting room. Ryder brought down boxes from the attic filled with decorations his mother had collected over the years. There were strings of popcorn and cranberries, delicate glass ornaments, and a beautiful star for the top. "My father made that star," Ryder said, holding it carefully. "It was the first Christmas after they were married. He carved it out of wood and my mother painted it gold." They spent the afternoon decorating the tree together. Sarah had never done anything like this before, and she found herself laughing as she tried to string the popcorn without eating it. Ryder told her stories about his childhood, about Christmas mornings with his family, about his sister Emily, and how she had loved the decorations. "She always insisted on putting the star on top," Ryder said softly. "Even when she got older, she said it was her job. The last Christmas we had together, she was 18. She stood on a chair to reach the top and nearly fell off. I had to catch her." He smiled at the memory, though his eyes were sad. "She laughed so hard. She had the best laugh." Sarah reached out and touched his arm gently. "She would be proud of you, of what you did for me." Ryder looked at her, and the air between them seemed to change, to crackle with something unspoken. "Sarah," he said quietly, "yes, I need to tell you something. I have been trying to find the right words for weeks, but there never seems to be a perfect time." He took a breath. "You do not owe me anything. I want you to know that first. You are free to leave whenever you want or to stay as long as you like. But I need you to know that somewhere along the way I started to care for you, more than care for you." Sarah's heart began to pound. "Ryder, let me finish," he said. "I know the circumstances of how you came here were terrible. I know you might not ever be able to see me as anything other than the man who bought you. But I am hoping, maybe, that you could see me as something more, as a man who respects you. A man who would be honored if you chose to stay not because you felt obligated, but because you wanted to." Sarah felt tears prickling her eyes. "You truly do not know, do you?" "Know what?" "That I fell in love with you weeks ago," Sarah said, the words tumbling out. "I have been so scared to admit it, even to myself. I thought maybe I was just grateful or confused or traumatized. But it is not any of those things. I love you, Ryder Dalton. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you see the best in people. I love the way you treat your animals and the way you talk about your family. I love that you gave me a choice when I had none." Ryder stared at her for a moment, as if he could not quite believe what he was hearing. Then he crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides and cupped her face in his hands. "Can I kiss you, please?" Sarah breathed. His lips met hers gently at first, tentative and questioning. But when Sarah responded, wrapping her arms around his neck, the kiss deepened. It was everything a first kiss should be, sweet and passionate, full of promise and hope. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," Ryder said again, resting his forehead against hers. "I will spend every day proving that you made the right choice." "I know I did," Sarah said. They finished decorating the tree together, stealing kisses between ornaments. When they finally stepped back to admire their work, the tree glowed in the lamplight, beautiful and perfect. Ryder put his arm around Sarah's waist, and she leaned into him, marveling at how right it felt. That night, they sat together by the fire, talking late into the evening. They spoke about their hopes and dreams, about the future they could build together. Ryder wanted to expand the ranch, to breed better horses. Sarah surprised herself by admitting she had always wanted to learn to read better, to have access to books and knowledge. "There is a library in Durango," Ryder said. "We can go every week if you want. I will help you with any words you do not know." "You would do that?" "I would do anything for you," Ryder said simply. "Anything at all." Christmas came, and with it, more snow. Ryder gave Sarah a leather-bound book of poetry and a beautiful locket that had belonged to his mother. Sarah had saved the money she had earned from selling some eggs to the general store and bought Ryder a new pair of leather gloves and a warm scarf she had knitted in secret. "You made this?" Ryder asked, wrapping the scarf around his neck. "It is not very good," Sarah said, suddenly shy. "I am still learning." "It is perfect," Ryder said, kissing her soundly. "Absolutely perfect." They spent Christmas Day at the ranch with Miguel, James, and Billy. Sarah cooked a ham and made biscuits, while Ryder prepared vegetables and made his mother's special gravy recipe. The 5 of them sat around the big dining table, eating and laughing and sharing stories. It was the best Christmas Sarah could remember. That night, after the ranch hands had gone to the bunkhouse, Ryder took Sarah's hands in his. "Marry me," he said. Sarah's breath caught. "What?" "Marry me," Ryder repeated. "I know it has not been very long, but I know what I want. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you, a family. I want to grow old on this ranch with you by my side." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "This was my grandmother's ring. It is not fancy, but it has been in my family for 3 generations. I would be honored if you would wear it." Sarah looked at the ring, then at Ryder's face. She saw love there and hope and a vulnerability that made her heart ache. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Ryder slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her until the world fell away and there was nothing but the 2 of them and the love they had found in the most unlikely of circumstances. They were married in January 1883, in a small ceremony at the church in Durango. Mrs. Henderson from the dress shop and her husband stood as witnesses, along with Miguel, James, and Billy. Sarah wore a new dress of pale blue silk that Ryder had surprised her with, and she carried a bouquet of dried wildflowers. As they exchanged vows, Sarah looked into Ryder's eyes and saw her future reflected there. It was a future full of possibility, of love, of the family she had always wanted. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ryder kissed her with such tenderness that Sarah felt tears of joy streaming down her face. The people of Durango were not all accepting of their marriage. Some still whispered about the circumstances of their meeting. But Sarah found she did not care. She had Ryder and the ranch, and the promise of a life built on mutual respect and love. That was more than most people ever got. They saw Thomas one more time about a month after the wedding. He approached them on the street, looking even worse than before. His clothes were dirty and his eyes were bloodshot. "Sarah," he said, reaching out, "please, I need help. I owe money again. If you could just loan me a little." "No," Sarah said firmly. She felt Ryder's solid presence beside her, but she did not need him to fight this battle for her. "I am done helping you, Thomas. You made your choice when you sold me. Now you have to live with the consequences." "But I am your brother," Thomas pleaded. "You stopped being my brother the day you put me on that auction block," Sarah said. "I have a new family now. One that actually cares about me." She took Ryder's arm. "Goodbye, Thomas." They walked away and Sarah never looked back. She felt Ryder squeeze her hand, a silent show of support. "Are you all right?" he asked when they were out of earshot. "I am better than all right," Sarah said. "I am free." Spring came to the ranch with an explosion of wildflowers and new life. Daisy and Morning Star thrived, and Ryder began training the young filly to saddle. Sarah threw herself into learning everything she could about running the ranch. She took over the bookkeeping, proving to have a natural head for numbers. She also started a garden, planting vegetables and herbs to supplement their meals. In late April, Sarah realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she thought it was just the stress of adjusting to her new life. But when another month passed and she began feeling nauseated in the mornings, she knew. She was pregnant. She told Ryder one evening after supper. He was reading by the fire and she sat down beside him, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "There is a baby," she said simply. "Our baby." Ryder's eyes went wide. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be." A slow smile spread across his face, and then he was pulling her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Sarah asked, though she could already see the answer in his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Ryder said. He kissed her belly gently. "Hello in there, little one. I am your papa. I cannot wait to meet you." The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah suffered from terrible morning sickness for the first few months, and Ryder was constantly worried about her. He tried to make her rest more, but Sarah refused to be coddled. She had never been the type to sit idle, and pregnancy was not going to change that. "I am not made of glass," she told him when he tried to stop her from carrying a basket of laundry. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I will be fine." But Ryder could not help his protectiveness. He brought her water constantly, made sure she ate enough, and rubbed her feet when they swelled. He talked to the baby every night, telling it stories about the ranch and the mountains and all the things they would do together. Sarah would lie in bed, one hand on her growing belly, and listen to Ryder's deep voice, falling more in love with him every day. The baby came in December, just as the first snow began to fall. Sarah's labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly a day and a half. Ryder stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her brow. Mrs. Henderson came to act as midwife, her capable hands and calm demeanor a comfort in the midst of the pain. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, the baby was born. a boy with strong lungs and a head full of dark hair. Ryder cried when Mrs. Henderson placed the baby in his arms, his hands trembling as he looked down at his son. "He is perfect," Ryder breathed. "Sarah, look what we made." Sarah was exhausted, but she smiled as Ryder brought the baby to her. She took her son in her arms and marveled at his tiny fingers, his rosebud mouth, the way he fit so perfectly against her chest. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." They named him James Emmett Dalton, after Ryder's father and Sarah's father. Little Jamie, as they called him, was a good baby, healthy and alert. He had Ryder's green eyes and Sarah's dark hair, and from the moment he was born, he had both of his parents wrapped around his tiny finger. Those first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful. Sarah and Ryder took turns walking the floor with Jamie when he fussed at night. They marveled over every coo and gurgle, every milestone, no matter how small. Ryder proved to be a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint and spending hours just holding his son. "I never want him to doubt that he is loved," Ryder told Sarah one night as he rocked Jamie to sleep. "I want him to grow up knowing he is safe and valued and precious." "He will," Sarah assured him. "With us as his parents, how could he not?" As Jamie grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Ryder's horse breeding program began to pay off, and buyers came from as far as Denver to purchase his stock. Sarah's garden expanded, and she began selling her excess produce in town. They hired 2 more ranch hands to help with the increased work, and built an addition onto the house with a proper nursery. Sarah sometimes thought about her life before Ryder, before the ranch. It seemed like a lifetime ago, like something that had happened to a different person. She barely recognized the frightened young woman who had stood on that auction block, sure that her life was over. That woman had been broken by hardship and betrayal. But Sarah had learned that being broken did not mean being destroyed. She had put herself back together, stronger than before. When Jamie was 2 years old, Sarah found herself pregnant again. This time, she recognized the signs immediately. Ryder was ecstatic, already planning how they would expand the nursery and where they would put a second crib. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and Sarah actually enjoyed it, feeling powerful and alive as her body nurtured this new life. Their daughter was born in the spring, arriving quickly and easily compared to Jamie's difficult birth. She had Sarah's dark eyes and Ryder's straight nose, and when she cried, it was with a determination that made both parents laugh. "She knows what she wants," Sarah said, nursing her newborn daughter. "Just like her mother," Ryder replied, kissing Sarah's forehead. They named her Emily Grace, after Ryder's sister, and in honor of the grace that had brought them together. Little Emily was a feisty baby, demanding and stubborn but also incredibly sweet. Jamie was fascinated by his new sister, constantly wanting to touch her soft hair and hold her tiny hand. The years passed in a blur of love and hard work. Jamie grew into a sturdy boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. Emily proved to be fearless, always climbing things she should not and getting into mischief. Ryder and Sarah added more rooms to the house and more acres to the ranch. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated good years and struggled through difficult ones. But through it all, they had each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ryder took Sarah back to the north pasture where they had first ridden together. The aspens were golden again, just as they had been that first autumn. They sat on the same fallen log, their hands intertwined, and looked out over the valley. "You ever regret it?" Sarah asked. "The way we started, the circumstances." Ryder was quiet for a moment, considering. "I regret that you had to go through that pain," he said finally. "I regret that your brother betrayed you and that you were put in that position. but I do not regret a single moment since you came home with me. Not one. You and Jamie and Emily are the best things that ever happened to me." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to think my life was over that day. I thought I would never be happy again. I could not imagine a future worth living. And now I cannot imagine anything else. This life, this family, this love, it is everything I never knew I needed." She turned to look at him. "You saved me, Ryder, in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me too," Ryder said. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions. You made me want to really live again." They kissed there in the golden light, the mountains watching over them like they always had. It was the same place where they had first admitted their feelings, where their future together had begun to take shape. And it felt right to come back here, to remember and to celebrate how far they had come. As the years continued to unfold, the ranch became known throughout Colorado for its quality horses and the people who ran it. Sarah and Ryder were respected members of the community, known for their fairness and their generosity. They gave jobs to people who needed them, helped neighbors in times of trouble, and always had an open door for those in need. Sarah heard news of Thomas occasionally through the town gossip. He had left Durango eventually, drifting from place to place, never able to stay in one spot for long. Part of her felt sad for him, for the waste of his life and potential. But she had long since let go of any guilt or responsibility for his choices. He had made his bed and he would have to lie in it. Jamie grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with a natural way with horses. Emily became a skilled rider, fearless and independent. They both knew the story of how their parents had met, though Sarah and Ryder were careful in how they told it. They emphasized the love and the choice, not the pain and the humiliation. "You mean Papa bought you?" Jamie asked when he was 12, trying to understand. "In a way," Sarah said carefully, "but what he really bought was my freedom. He gave me a choice when I had none, and I chose him and I chose this life and I have never regretted it." "I am glad he did," Jamie said seriously. "Otherwise I would not be here." "Neither would I," Emily piped up. "And that would be terrible." Sarah laughed and pulled both her children close. "Yes, it would be terrible indeed." On a warm summer evening when Sarah was 45 years old and Ryder 48, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Jamie was in the barn tending to a mare about to foal, and Emily was visiting a friend in town. It was just the two of them, comfortable in the silence that came from years of knowing each other. "Remember that first night?" Sarah asked. "When you brought me here and gave me a room with a lock on the door?" "I remember," Ryder said. "I remember thinking you looked terrified and trying to figure out how to make you feel safe." "I was terrified," Sarah admitted. "I did not know what you would want from me. I had convinced myself that no one could be as kind as you seemed. And now I know better," Sarah said. She took his hand, weathered now with age and work but still strong. "Now I know that kindness is real, that love is real. That sometimes, in the darkest moments, grace finds a way through." Ryder brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "You are my grace, Sarah Dalton, every single day." They sat together as the stars began to appear, the same stars that had watched over them since the beginning. The house behind them glowed with lamplight, warm and welcoming. In the barn, Jamie was helping a new life into the world. In town, Emily was laughing with her friends. And here, on this porch, Sarah and Ryder held each other close, grateful for every moment, every choice, every twist of fate that had brought them together. Sarah thought back to that girl on the auction block, sure her life was over. If she could send a message back through time, she would tell that girl to hold on, to have faith, to trust that even in the darkest night, dawn would come, She would tell her that the cowboy who paid double would turn out to be the love of her life. That from the ashes of her old life, something beautiful would grow. Years turned to decades. Sarah and Ryder grew older together, their hair turning gray, their steps slowing. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened with time, becoming richer and more precious. They watched their children marry and have children of their own, filling the ranch house with the laughter of grandchildren. Jamie married a kind woman named Catherine from a neighboring ranch, and they had 3 daughters. Emily married a schoolteacher named Robert, and they had twin boys who reminded everyone of Jamie and Emily at that age. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through the generations along with the story of how it had all begun. On their 50th wedding anniversary, Sarah and Ryder stood in the same church where they had married, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. They renewed their vows with trembling voices and tears in their eyes. When Ryder said, "I do," this time, his voice was shaky with age but no less certain. When Sarah said, "I do," she meant it with every fiber of her being. That night alone in their room, Ryder held Sarah close. 50 years, he marveled. Half a century. "Best 50 years of my life," Sarah said. "Every single day. Even the hard ones, especially the hard ones," Sarah said, "because we faced them together." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms the way they had slept for 50 years. Outside, the mountains stood eternal under the stars, watching over the ranch where love had bloomed from the most unlikely of beginnings. Sarah Dalton lived to be 78 years old, surrounded by her family in the house that Ryder had built. Ryder held her hand as she took her last breath, and his final words to her were the same words he had spoken for 56 years. "I love you." Ryder followed her 6 months later, his heart simply unable to go on without her. They were buried side by side in the small cemetery overlooking the north pasture, where the aspens turned gold every autumn and the view stretched forever. Their headstone was simple: Ryder and Sarah Dalton, together in life, together in death, together forever. But their love lived on in the ranch they had built, in the children and grandchildren they had raised, in the legacy of kindness and grace they had left behind. And sometimes, on golden autumn afternoons when the aspens shimmer and the mountains glow, people swear they can see 2 figures on horseback riding through the valley, their love transcending even death itself. The story of the woman who was sold to pay her brother's debts and the cowboy who paid double became legend in Colorado. It was told and retold, passed down through generations. But those who knew the truth understood that it was not just a story about being saved. It was a story about choosing love, about building something beautiful from broken pieces, about the grace that finds us even in our darkest hours. And in the end, it was a story about 2 people who found each other against all odds and loved each other with everything they had, for as long as they both lived. That kind of love, the kind that transforms and heals and endures, is the rarest and most precious thing in the world. Sarah and Ryder had it, and they never took a single day of it for granted. Their ranch still stands today, run by their great-great-grandchildren, a testament to what can grow when love is planted in even the rockiest soil. And in the barn, there is still a stall for Morning Star's descendants, still horses being bred and trained with the same care and respect that Ryder showed all those years ago. The story ends as all good love stories do, with a promise kept, a life well lived, and a love that death itself could not diminish. Sarah Zimmerman, who stood on an auction block in Durango, Colorado in 1882, certain her life was over, could never have imagined the beautiful future that awaited her. But Ryder Dalton saw it from the moment he laid eyes on her, and he was willing to pay any price to give her the chance to see it too. And so they lived, and so they loved, and so their story became the kind of tale that reminds us all that even in our darkest moments, hope remains. That sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms. That love, real love, is always worth fighting for. And that the best stories are not the ones that begin perfectly, but the ones that end with two souls finding their way home to each other, no matter how long or difficult the journey.